everybody. Here we are back again. It's your two dads. We're coming with the real prototypical two dads. I've got myself and I've got a guest here with me. His name is David, and I should have asked this beforehand, meant to, so forgive me if I pronounce it wrong. David Breckemeyer. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's way better than I usually get because a lot of times people throw in 4 or 5 extra syllables, and it's pretty much that's it. We don't always pronounce the part, so sometimes I just go with Beckmeyer without the
Breckemeyer.
Beckemeyer part. But that was darn good.
All right. Well, I do appreciate that. I knew if I didn't ask beforehand, I'd get it wrong. I know myself well. With that being said, though, he is the host of the Outrage Overlord podcast, and I'm coming in here just as blind as you are, guest. I've known him a little bit in our Yerg's radio group, podcast, and associated discussions. But beyond that, I'm learning as you are. So uh, go ahead and give us a little bit of a brief origin story there, David.
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. Thanks for having me on the show. I think this is gonna be fun. Yeah, so I'm a former tech guy. I was like a tech executive and software developer and in the tech industry for a long, long time. Retired from that and kind of got interested in this idea. Everybody's kind of stressed out there and we're losing friends. We're fighting over politics all the time. So I kind of took that on as a thing to go and understand a little better. So I started this podcast called Outrage Overload because we're overloaded with outrage. So I started this podcast called Outrage Overload, and I do that. I talk to scientists, researchers, authors, and we kind of look at the science of like why are we like this, and then we try to address like are there some ways we can lower the temperature out there and maybe restore, preserve our country. Basically, all I'm trying to do is prevent civil war. So nothing major.
No, yeah, nothing big.
Yeah.
And just the simple stuff. I'm right behind you. I'm just trying to get dads and veterans to speak at all. So, we're both heading uphill on that one. With that being said, though, I do, find that interesting. I'm learning, like I said, right along with everybody as far as what your podcast is about. If nothing else, I feel like you're out there kind of trying to cut down on the anger and make everybody a little bit happier, maybe a little bit calmer. And that's something that, like you said, everybody could use in their day to day. I mean, even I'm sure yourself and myself, there's times where we get irrationally angry over virtually nothing, and it's always good to have scientific techniques, methods, tips, tricks to adjust and improvise and adapt and overcome that sort of thing. So if you're out there, listeners, and that does interest you, please do give that a listen and check that out and give it as many stars as you can, all the stars that they have, whatever it is, 5, 6, 10, give them all of them, and great ratings too. But with that, we will move on into the main topic of discussion here today. In these little bonus episodes, we are talking about something that I myself feel like I might be lacking. I am not 100% one way or the other, which is why I'm here talking to other men in various fields, most previous guests, but at the same time, always happy to have someone new's opinion on this topic. And that is mental toughness and how we might pass that on to our children, how we got that ourselves, just the whole kit and caboodle. So, with that being said, we'll start off. And I guess we'll make the questions hard right off the bat. Do you consider yourself to be mentally tough? And if so, where did you get that from?
Yeah, I guess it's like all humans, we have our good days and our bad days, but I would say overall, I think it's something that I've developed and that I had, started pretty early, and I think it comes from my parents and extended family, so my whole community. I had my mom was sort of generation. She was raised in the Depression era, and my grandparents, went through that era as adults. And so I think that added a lot of mental toughness to folks and also some empathy and compassion in some ways too. But I think that may be a piece of it, that there's some of that background. And also, of course, they had to deal with World War II and all that. And I think some of that maybe plays into it as well. My dad was a World War II vet. So maybe some of that plays into it as well. So yeah, I mean, I think we've always, my kid would tell you that, and he's not a kid anymore; he's in his 30s. But he would probably tell you that we were super hard on him, and probably other people would say, "Oh, he was spoiled and got whatever he wanted." So probably both those stories have some truth to them, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. But so we always, and I think my wife's the tough one in the family. She's the one who maybe she's the one who really drove that into him even more than me. But yeah, I think I carry that trait.
Awesome, awesome to get so complete an answer to a question. Sometimes it feels like that, I'll ask something and it's like the first time they've ever heard that question, but you got right down to it and gave us exactly what we were looking for there. As far as your parents being from an earlier age, I it did cross my mind, and I wondered what you thought about this. Do you think that mental toughness, that maybe the degree or the method to attain it, do you think it changes from generation to generation, at least enough to be remarked on?
I mean, maybe in its essence it doesn't change, but yeah, I think it changes. I think it changes in how it presents and how you maybe coach it or teach it because you probably can't do the stuff my grandfather maybe did, did to their kids to get mental toughness, right? Probably not cool. Probably wasn't great then either, but it was certainly socially acceptable to do it then. So you wouldn't want to do that stuff now for sure. So there's those maybe some of those techniques change, but and to some extent, I'm always a little bit open to finding that balance between harsher approaches too. Like I'm a little bit old school. I mean, I'm not proposing corporal punishment necessarily, but I think you can be tough with kids even these days. But so yeah, I would say in essence it feels like it doesn't change that much. I mean, down at depending on how far you unpeel that onion, right? But probably along the ways, yeah, some things change for sure.
Okay, so once more, good opinion, good content. I do appreciate that. Moving a little bit sideways more than forward, I wanted to get into more of your personal techniques, I guess, when it comes to dealing with stress and I guess putting that mental toughness into action. Let's say, for example, you've had just a terrible day, whatever, fill in the blank has happened and it's just left you at your wits' end. How do you, cope at the end of the day? How do you recharge and keep things on an even keel?
That's a toughie. You know, um, I, I I think, it is kind of a trade-off between sort of solitude and what you can take on your own, and also relying on community and a support system too. I think if you don't have any support system, I think you can only do so much on your own. But I think, you can obviously try to step back. You can try to do some of the classic, maybe you could say they're cliche-ish kind of things, but some mindfulness type stuff, some, just slow the breath, try to get a perspective on it and try to seek out some of those basics, like seek out, what can I be thankful for here? That there's a lot of science around, you know, gratefulness and how that helps you in so many ways. So spending some energy trying to find things you're grateful for can help in a lot of ways. And but then I think it does sometimes you just can't do it all on your own too, right? So sometimes it does mean maybe you have that sounding board. Like, you know what? You're my spouse. I don't want to hear anything back. I want you to give me any help. I just want you to listen for 10 minutes as I rant about this thing. And and I think if you have that support system, there's somebody in your life that can do that, that's an obligation that you have to take that side of it as well sometimes. But I think all those things can help, but it can be tough to do that all on your own. So I do worry a little bit saying, oh, well, just, buckle up and, buck up and do it all yourself, because even with as much mental toughness as you have, sometimes you need that support system, I think.
I do agree. I also agree with your comments about mindfulness and gratitude and things of that nature, because that does go a long way. Just personally, I can attest to that fact. I will use mindfulness to keep myself, in the present, as opposed to off on some anxiety-ridden fancy about what may or may not be happening tomorrow or last week or next year. So good to know that I'm at least, kind of sort of doing, you know, recommended techniques of that sort. I Let's see.
Well,
So
let me add to that for just a quick sec, because I think another piece of that, when we talk about that gratefulness thing is another piece of that, maybe a different spin, is that we are so negatively biased, right? I mean, that's part of our psychology as well, is that we always are looking for the negative. We always kind of want to complain about things. And that's another way to step back too, is like, things are like overall, I mean, the world in general is pretty good. Obviously, some folks have it pretty bad. But for the most part, things have never been this good, and we just take it for granted a lot of the times. And things are pretty good out there; they really are. And so it's easy to just complain all the time, and that's not good for us either. And so putting some of that in perspective, like we should, and also like if you live in this country, we have it pretty good despite all our complaints. We do still have it pretty darn good, especially in terms of freedom of the press, and we still have a judicial system that's pretty much independent, and there's some justice there and this kind of stuff. Like that's not true everywhere in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like how you said pretty much in some, but at the same time, that's true. Yeah, we do have those things to fall back on and to kind of give ourselves hope and gratitude that we do have it better than we could. And I feel like sometimes it is a trope to kind of say things of that nature, but at the same time, it's a trope because it's true. You really do have to kind of uh, go back to the basics at times, because it could be so much worse. And I think that here, maybe it's a little bit harder for us. Maybe I've not given too much thought to this, but being in America, being a little bit entitled to certain things, being a little bit biased when it comes to what we may or may not deserve, I think maybe that makes it a little bit harder to take comfort in the fact that I have a home to go to tonight, and there's going to be power, and there's not going to be bombs dropping, and like for some people, it's just not enough. But I think that if it can be enough for you, that it can be great comfort. Moving on to the basis of the show, being a dad. How did you go about, and you can take this as specifically or as generally as you want, how did you go about imparting mental toughness to your son or children?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we had an only, so we were kind of trying to be conscious of that. Like he needs some of that support, some peer support as well, right? So we had him participate in things like scouts, and he really took to that. And I think that was, a piece of that. And we also, right from the start, my, like I said, my wife's a pretty tough cookie. And then, we took things seriously. Like we talked a lot about if you're going to do this thing, you're going to make a commitment, you're making a commitment to yourself, but you're also making a commitment to the others in this group. And that kind of thing. And he bolted onto that pretty quickly. And but he would complain, of course, as a kid. It wouldn't be a kid if he didn't complain sometimes. But he'd get that reinforcement a lot that, hey, no, you can't drop out now. If you did that here, then, what are you gonna, how you like that when somebody, maybe does that to you later, and maybe doesn't show up for their role or whatever, and doesn't do their part. So he had that pretty hard, and he would often complain like, "Well, the other kids do it all the time." Well, yeah, but you're not the other kids. You're not the other kids. You're not going to do that. So, and I think so. I think those were all things like he wasn't into sports when he was really young yet. I mean, he tried baseball, he tried other ones, and that none of those stuck. Um, and he didn't really get hard. He did Kempo karate, and he did go all the way to his black belt, which was a pretty big accomplishment. But so that was a big commitment, and he did do that. But he didn't really get into it more until a little bit older, and he started wrestling, and that was kind of the sport that really got him going. And if there's a sport where you need some mental toughness, I would say wrestling is one of the ones up on the list, right? I mean, if you don't know that sport very well, or even if you just watch it casually, it may not look like much is going on, but there is so much energy being spent in that 2 minutes, or 3 minutes in that round, that it doesn't look like much is going on, but I mean, it's just very intense. And you're burning off so many calories in that 2 minutes, working so hard. And so, of course, in order to do that 2 minutes, and I think, I don't remember the math, but we did this math on this, and like for every 2 minutes or every minute in the ring, it was like on the mat, it was like just hours and hours of practice, right? I mean, it was so much practice to get those 2 minutes on a tournament somewhere. And unless you're willing to put in that work, those 2 minutes on mat aren't going to go very well, right? And so I mean, I think that was one place where that really started to shine. And I think so all that kind of combined, I think we had a strong work ethic in our household. And I think that to me, and I may be taking the mental toughness farther than your definition too. I'm not sure. We can talk about that a little bit if you'd like, but I kind of carry it beyond sports and other things, and carry it into, kind of work ethic, and just this, your community involvement and how you show up everywhere, right? Um, and so, that we enforced that pretty hard, and we were lucky. I mean, he bought into it, right? So we didn't have to, we had a kid that was pretty pliable in that regard, and he was really bought into it. And now it's like maybe the student has become the teacher kind of thing. I think for a long time I've probably been learning more from him than I'm teaching him, right?
That's how it goes. So it sounds like it was maybe not something that you sat down with your wife and was like, okay, we're going to teach mental toughness and this is how we're going to do it. But at the same time, it was definitely a focus, definitely something that you placed a lot of importance on at certain points. The group sports, the solo sports, things of that nature that really did go a long way toward building a good character, a tougher quote unquote character. So I can see where that would kind of benefit. I don't want to, I certainly don't want to say make things easier or use the word easy in any fashion, but certainly benefit the building of a youth's mind. My own situation growing up, I didn't. My parents were drug addicts, alcoholics. If you've listened to a couple episodes, you've heard me say this time and again. So I think that my biggest roadblock was that I didn't have anybody really taking that sort of attention in what I was going through and how I was developing. Uh, I've always said that I had to learn how to dad and really how to be a man in general, just on my own, over time. And it's left me even to this day kind of lacking in certain areas that I feel maybe mistakenly, but still yet I feel that other men may be ahead of me. So I really do feel it just reinforces the fact that a father is huge importance to a son, a daughter, whoever. And the fact that you were there, that you took an interest, I think that really did, kind of that was half the battle right there. I always say that if knowing is half the battle, then just being there is the other half. So you really did kind of knock it out of the park with that, and everything after that, you with the wrestling and things of that sort, you really just kind of reinforced lessons and messages that you were already imparting. This crosses my mind, and I don't know how, I guess, widespread this is, but I did do an interview recently with a gentleman. He's an author. He's also a press secretary in Washington. So his parenting style might be a little bit different. We didn't get too deeply into it, but he actually had these recurring, and I won't call them tasks, but they were things that he did with his children as they were growing up, where he would tell them, for example, here's $5. Right? They would go to the mall, and he would say, here's $5. Don't come back until you get change. And I would never have thought to do that, but that clicked with me because I have this weird like thing about asking for change. Like it's hard to explain in the time that we have, but I need to be buying something in order to ask for change. So just something that simple really clicked with me. Did you do anything of that nature with your children or with your son?
I can't think of any, particular sort of tasks or things like that. We probably did, and I'm just not recalling right now, but I don't remember anything specifically like that. So, I want to say in your situation, I mean, one thing you certainly must have dealt with, I would imagine in that situation would be, certainly dealing with adversity, but you didn't necessarily have a great role model for how to deal with it. So you kind of had to figure that out on your own, it sounds like.
Yeah, I always say that my dad's his advice was terrible. I don't know why this sticks out to me, but I guess I was thinking about it recently. I remember when he told me when he was teaching me, once again, quote unquote, about credit and credit cards. He would say, just get one and don't pay the payment, and then eventually they'll stop calling, and then you can get another one. And that was like serious advice from my father. So yeah, there was quite a bit of adversity to my upbringing in terms of getting myself on the right track. It really is kind of admirable, I guess, if not to toot my own horn, that I'm not in prison somewhere because I really did have my work cut out for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at the statistics on that, not just your household, I don't know what your community was like, but that might have been a part of it. Maybe that helped a little bit, but I mean, that's a big part of our lives, right? I mean, even if, you know, even in what they're finding now is even growing up with two-parent family or whatever language we use these days. Um, the if your community doesn't have that very well, even that can be a negative impact to your chances of sort of, doing better later in life. So I don't know, maybe in your community there was others, that you had a role, maybe some role models around you that were like that. I don't know.
Well, I did have my grandmother, my father's mother, that grandmother's, it's so many branches, but her ex-husband, he was in my life for the longest time as a father figure. He was always my grandfather, no matter what anybody said. So I did have one male that was a good role model, a positive influence. And I really do look to that memory quite often in terms of how I learned to do virtually anything, and as an adult male, whether it be keeping your word or helping those that can't help themselves. These simple things like that. Things I learned from him, and I really do wonder sometimes, without him there, would I have learned those very simple things?
Hmm.
So this podcast, in a way, is inspired by my father, but it's also dedicated to my grandfather. So that dichotomy is a bit weird. But we are down here to the end, and I have pretty much hit all of my main points, everything I wanted to touch on. We have the word this a longer interview. Of course, we would get into more things, but I did want to just do this series specifically on mental toughness because I feel like I said I might be lacking that, probably am lacking it, but I'm learning more and more about why I'm lacking it and how I can overcome it, and how I can work around it to make sure that my son doesn't suffer from the same lack. And I do appreciate you coming on here and giving us your wisdom, a little bit of your story, and helping me out for no reason at all. We're virtually strangers, so I do appreciate that. And if I can ever do the same in any way, guest on your podcast or whatever the case may be, I will be more than happy to do that. But before we go, did you have anything else to add or anything else to promote?
Oh, I don't have anything necessary to promote, but I would say I would add on, follow up with something you said before, which was the sort of showing up. And people used to always ask me, like, what's one of the biggest things of being a parent? And I think it is showing up, right? And that's easier. Like that just a simple word doesn't sound like much, but making time. Like I really, one of my pet peeves is when people say, "Oh, I'm glad you had time to do this thing." No, nobody has time to do anything. You make time for it. In other words, you had to change your priorities around. You had to change your schedule around. You had to make time for this event. So, I think that's a huge one. I mean, making time to be there. And even if, like you say, I'm just there. I'm an idiot. I don't know what this topic is about. I don't know why I'm listening to this lecture, but I'm there and I'm here and he sees me there and that kind of thing, right? So I think that's a huge one. I mean, and like I said, it's making time, it's not having time. So it's more being there means making that time, which is not easy, right? You have to play around with schedules to make that happen and change your priorities. And so anyway, I think that's to follow on something you said. I think that's a huge one. I mean, just do that. You're way ahead of the game, right?
Yeah, if nothing else, they're going to know that you care, and that's a huge thing. So once again, I do agree virtually with everything you said. It's good to have an interview, however short, where there was never a time where I was like secretly, "Ooh, I don't agree with that." So it was good not to have that run across my mind. But with that being said, once again, thank you so much, David, for coming here and joining us on YouTube Dads, and sharing what you have and making us all a little bit smarter. So with that being said, I guess this is Corey, and for YouTube Dads, I'll check you later. And that's going to do it for the podcast. And none of this will be on reels or anything. But once again, appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. Like I said, I'm nobody to you yet. Maybe if your ex blows up, maybe we're working together more. But
Yeah.
until that time, thanks again. And anything I can do to return the favor, I'm more than willing. But until then, I will keep I'll go ahead and add you on Facebook. I usually do that already, but I'm trying to increase my scheduling, and it's kind of taken up a bit of time behind on editing anyways. So I
Right.
will go ahead and add you there.
I know the feeling.
I'm sure that you do. And when I get we'll wait a few weeks, and then I'll get in touch with you again and see if you would like to come back on for more, full interview.
Yeah, oh sure, anytime or anything you need. And I don't we're not strangers anymore, right? So
Right on. Yeah. Almost like friends now.
yeah,
Uh,
and I see
and
that Joy Division. Isn't that a Joy? Is that Joy Division or
Oh
something like
yeah,
that? Yeah,
hey,
check that out. That's like
right
our
on.
formative years, man.
I love me some Joy Division. Awesome that you recognize that. I was actually looking over my shoulder earlier, and I was like, "Oh, nobody's going to know what that is." Like they can see that and they can see that, but they'll never. So awesome, and you caught it with only a portion of the poster, so you must truly be a fan. I don't know what that says about your mental health,
Right.
but at least I know you're cool. So, anyways, you have a wonderful evening and a Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, you as well. Have a great holiday.